Hey guys, this is a market update. I have three key pieces of information in this video when it comes to trading Bitcoin and crypto right now in terms of where we are in the cycle and how we can go ahead and trade. So I'm just going to get right into those three pieces right here. Firstly, let's look at the Bitcoin chart, and I'm going to talk about Bitcoin versus Ethereum as well, because that's really interesting to see how that is playing out. But what you can see for the last 18 months or so is essentially a huge consolidation in the price of Bitcoin. After the big move that we had when money printing started, we kind of end of 20 going into 2021, what we've really seen now is just this price level between 30 and then obviously the tops here at 70. Now that's a big amount in terms of percentage terms, but you can very clearly see the lines that I've drawn on here are essentially showing us a huge consolidation for this period. And we're at the bottom end of it now, even considering, what has been actually the absolute worst performance in a generation in terms of the stock market. And at the end of this video, I will show you that because it's so interesting. But what we can see during this time, one of the worst stock market performances in living memory, we see here that Bitcoin is actually still just at the bottom of this consolidation range. So it's an interesting piece of data here. We're at 30,000, which as you can see right here, and you can see this bottom line here, is just huge support. So you would expect it to really trade around this level for a while before potentially trying to move further forward, unless we get some really awful economic results that will push it further. If it does break this 30,000 support, which we're at the moment, we're looking at this level down here around 25,000. 25,000 is not out of the question, because I want to show you this chart as well, which is essentially Bitcoin since inception. This is a week chart, so each candlestick is a week. And for me, when you really zoom out, and I'll talk about this at the end of the video as well, what you see is just one of the most incredible charts ever. This, for me, is essentially just a pure uptrend. Right now, this is a log scale, so what you're seeing is obviously very low prices for Bitcoin down here at the left, and obviously towards the top, the price movements are getting compressed because it's a log scale. But what I want to highlight here is essentially the 3 or 4 occasions where we've been at this kind of price point before. And what you can see is down here in the 2015, 16 area, where we come down to this black line, which is the 200 period moving average. So it's a 200 week moving average because we're looking at the weekly chart. That was an incredible buying opportunity, right? You got the blow off top, you then got the move back down, the kind of sell off back down to the 200 week. And then you get this consolidation and this just incredible move up. You get the blow off top again, and then it moves down to the 200 period moving average. Then we get the COVID crash. Now, obviously everything crashed then, but look where it wicked. And you can see this, it did wick down, but it kind of consolidated right here in terms of the candles around the 200 period. And now we're getting this sell-off, which is the kind of Fed dump the market sell-off. We're not quite at this level yet. And so you can't catch bottoms. But look, if you're a long-term trader, and obviously I'm an investor here, putting limit orders in around this level is something that I'm looking to do, especially around that kind of 25 area. Now, we did wick down here recently during the lunar kind of crash, but it's still not max pain. We could go through this kind of max pain scenario, trade down and down and down like this. But this has been typically throughout Bitcoin's entire history been the area of support. This is 13 years of history, or let's take it back to 2015 because it's kind of where we're looking at. But this history right here is showing us that this level should be, according to this chart, this very long-term trend, which obviously is extremely, a lot of data here, that would be kind of where you're looking at max pain. Can it go lower? Yes, of course. You really can't predict whether some hedge fund is going to blow up because of monetary tightening or what's happening. But this is the area. If you're a long-term investor, what else are you looking for? This is the area where you start to scale in and just start to kind of dollar cost average over a period. And I'll show you why that is important as well with the data that we'll see at the end of the video. Now, if you do want to trade Bitcoin, I'll leave a link to Bybit below, which you see me using here, this trading system. They will give you a deposit bonus. Click that link. They'll give you up to $4,000 in your futures trade trading account. So if you are a trader and you trade futures, they will give you a deposit bonus up to $4,000 just by depositing some crypto on the platform. So I'll leave that link in the description. But what I want to look at now is inflation, because this is really what is controlling the whole market right now, because the Fed is going off the inflation figures. If we just take a look at this data, you can see the kind of one thing that is the real kind of elephant in the room here, which is food and energy. And obviously a lot of the cost of food is actually energy as well, because it's transportation. You've seen Walmart and Target come out this week or kind of last week and say their reports were not that great, essentially saying that energy and transportation is just a crazy cost right now. But what we're seeing is the rate of growth of inflation just starting to come down. Inflation is not coming down, but the rate of growth is starting to slow. This is really important because the Fed has to remain ultra hawkish until those figures show that it's coming down. Once it's coming down, things change massively, because the Fed can then start to become a little bit more dovish and ease off a little bit. If this inflation keeps on, not good for equity and crypto markets. Just to show you here what the market thinks inflation is going to do, the inflation expectations, which this chart shows, is coming way, you can see they're coming way down, right? So we topped out around this level at 3.6 in April, just starting to come down now. So people and the market are expecting things to start coming down. Why I think that will happen as well is because if you look at the results of some consumer brands like Walmart and Target in the States, who are saying we've got tons of inventory that we haven't sold. That means they're going to start to discount that to get rid of it. That brings inflation down, the price of goods. Inflation coming down is the key, and it must come down, because once it starts coming down, then the Fed will start easing off and monetary conditions will come a little bit easier, and you'll see things like Bitcoin and crypto rocket again. The third piece of information is an incredible stat by Tom Bilello. So thanks to him on Twitter. Go and follow him. I'll try and link him below. This is showing us that we have indeed, in this past period, this sell-off that we've seen, this is now the third worst sell-off in living memory in the stock market, and therefore crypto as well, right? So what we can see right here is in 2022, we've had a 7-week decline in the S&P 500 and a 14% decline. Now, this is actually worse than the 1980 crash with a 7-week streak of price declines. That only declined 13%. Now, there are only 2 periods in history where we've had a worse time. That one was the 2001 dot-com bubble. That was an 8-week streak with a 15% decline. And then the 1970s crash. That was, by far the worst. We could even beat this now. Now, every single crash is different. And so you can't say that we're going to have the same outcomes of these. But if you just look on the right-hand side, this is what you can see, is that essentially, if you invest during one of the worst periods in the stock market that it's possible to have, if you buy and wait for 3 years, you have around a 95% chance of making money on those investments. Now, after the average return after 3 years, if you have invested in this terrible streak, was 31.8%. Now, this is the S&P 500, which is essentially the 500 best companies in the best economy in the world. Bitcoin is not that. I think Bitcoin is essentially a worldwide financial index. And so that's why I believe it has uncorrelated upside potential, because it's the first time really that you can see emerging markets genuinely have a financial infrastructure that could create a lot of wealth for those areas. And so that's why I think Bitcoin has potentially quite a large upside in comparison to the S&P 500, because these stocks are now in an economy that isn't growing like it did before. Look at all of these time periods. This was in the 70s, 80s, 2000. America was a very different place, and the Western world, is now slowing in its growth. And so Bitcoin is potentially, for me, something that can have more exposure to those high growth areas, plus having a lot of exposure to those funds in the Western world as well. But what this shows is that this can definitely keep crashing short term. 3 months, 6 months, you can see the returns aren't great, But if you invest during this awful period and wait 3 years, and if you're an investor, that's not a lot of time, you have an over 90% chance of actually making really decent returns if you're investing in good assets. This is the S&P. These are top A1 quality assets, and not a bunch of speculative altcoins for sure, but just to give you this data. Then we go back to the long-term Bitcoin chart, and you can see that we are entering buying territory right here. Over a shorter time frame, of course, no one can predict what will happen. You can see we're at a massive support level right here, and I would not be surprised if something occurs in the markets and shocks us down to, kind of that 25 level or 20 level, because that's just max pain and that's what always happens. But over the long term, we are in a buying opportunity area, in my opinion. Anyway, if you do want to trade kind of short term and trade futures on Bybit, click that link below. You can get up to $4,000 as a deposit bonus if you put some crypto on their platform. They'll give you that in the futures account, and then you can go and trade with that bonus. Anyway, I'm James with MoneyZG. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.